I'm recording now. Okay, so yes. So Erica is going to do our land acknowledgement. Erica?
Hi there. Thanks for everyone being here. Thanks for having me on the call. I would like to acknowledge that we are the presidents of the Huron, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee people of this land. And I do want to do a quick reading. This is by the poet laureate Rita Joe. Is an Indigenous laureate from Canada, and her poem's called I Lost My Talk. If you could give me a moment. I lost my talk, the talk you took away when I was a little girl at the Shubinachi school. You snatched it away. I speak like you, I think like you, I create like you. Scrambled ballad about my word. Two ways I talk, both ways I say, your way is more powerful. So gently I offer my hand and ask, let me find my talk so I can talk, teach you about me. I think it's important to acknowledge listening in today's world, and with all the hurt that we've been feeling lately, I think opening our ears is a priority, and that's where I wanted to leave that note. Thank you.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight. It is especially this week, it is really important for us to take the time to hear those words and acknowledge that experience. So now I am super excited to introduce to you our panelists. The first on our panel is Mayor Harrison. He has only 33 years of experience as a principal in elementary schools, and he began his community service in 1991 as a deputy reeve and continued from that to councillor at Quinte West, and then in 2014 became mayor of Quinte West. So I can't imagine that we can get much more experienced person than Mayor Harrison. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Also on our panel is Mayor Ferguson.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Something's wrong.
Oh, no, you're good. Mayor Ferguson fell in love with Prince Edward County 30 years ago and became, after a long career in senior sales and marketing, he became a councillor for South Marysburg in 2014 and then mayor of Prince Edward County in 2018. And our last panelist is Mayor Panchuk, who came to Belleville area around 20 years ago to start his business. He became involved in the community in a number of different ways, from being president to the Chamber of Commerce to vice president of the Belleville Agricultural Society before becoming a councillor in 2014 for the city of Belleville, and now the mayor of the city of Belleville in 2018. And so we have a very experienced panel here to discuss these issues. And I'm super excited to introduce our host tonight, who is Mike Schreiner, leader of the Green Party of Ontario since 2009, and the first Green MP in the legislature in Toronto for Guelph and for the Greens. So we're very excited. Mike, thanks for coming.
Well, thanks, Lori, for that kind introduction and for organizing such an esteemed panel. Should I call all of you your worships, or just Steve, Jim, and Mitch?
Fine by me.
Sounds good. Sounds good. It's a real honor to join you. I'm joining you from Guelph today, where we just had a major downpour. So if you have any shortage of out your way, it's probably coming towards you, because it certainly passed through Guelph about an hour ago. And I also just want to acknowledge that I'm on the treaty, I'm speaking to you from the Treaty 3 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and just reaffirm the Green Party's commitment to the truth and reconciliation process. And I'm very excited about the theme, Lori, tonight, empowering municipalities, because I think community, in many respects, is really at the heart of what the Green Party is all about. And I think over the last 15 months during the pandemic, people have been reminded of just what a vital role municipal governments play, and what an important leadership role mayors in particular play. I know I've been in pretty much daily contact with the mayor of Guelph and our MP as well, just helping to lead our community and through the pandemic, and starting now to think about what it's going to take to emerge and recover from the pandemic. And so I just really want to offer a sincere thank you to all three of the mayors tonight for your leadership and just for the vital role that I know you play in your communities. And if I could extend that to your councilors and municipal staff as well, because I know how hard they've all been working, particularly over the last 15 months. And I was excited about a week and a half ago, the Green Party launched our affordable housing platform, really based on 9 strategies centered around 3 pillars: building connected, affordable, sustainable communities, and really recognizing the important partnership that I think all 3 levels of government are going to have to play in addressing housing affordability in our province, which ultimately really addresses the sustainability and viability of our municipalities as well. And the fact that if we're going to increase housing supply to address affordability issues, we have to do it in a way that protects our agricultural lands, our green space, our wetlands. I always remind folks, particularly in Toronto, that the largest employer in the province is our food and farming sector, over 800,000 jobs, $50 billion contribution to our GDP. And as we grow our communities, we certainly don't want to be paving over the asset base of that wealth. And the province, I think, has a really important role to play in ensuring that we partner with municipalities in particular to address issues around affordable housing and shelter costs that were downloaded onto municipalities. So we've actually proposed cost sharing that at a 50-50, just to help take pressure off municipal budgets, because we know that municipal budgets are under an intense, all government budgets right now are under intense pressure, but municipalities have the least capacity to address financial issues, can't run a deficit, and don't have the fiscal tools that upper levels of government have. And also to acknowledge that if we put too much pressure on the property tax base, that it's actually going to contribute and add to the housing affordability crunch that so many families are playing. And I also want to acknowledge just, I think, what a vital role municipalities play in designing livable communities that are places where people are connected to work, connected to the local businesses they want to support, connected to the amenities and services they need. And the decisions that are made, or that municipalities make in partnership with the province, have a huge determination in the quality and well-being of people's day-to-day lives in our communities, and likewise have a really important role in addressing the climate crisis and reducing climate pollution, especially when it comes to addressing transportation issues, which is our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the province. And a lot of that is driven by the way in which we design our communities, in addition to other issues around public transit, electrified transportation, etc. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation, because we clearly have 3 experts with a lot of experience, and I would prefer to do less talking and more listening. And so I'm going to open it up and ask a few questions and really hopefully facilitate the conversation. And so I'm wondering, Jim, if I could start with you with the first question, and then I'll ask all the others to answer as well. And I'm asking you first, Jim, because I think you've been mayor the longest. So you get to go first. And the question really is what are the biggest barriers and challenges that municipalities are facing right now And what role can the provincial government play to help you overcome those challenges and address some of the barriers that your councils are facing in terms of building, a successful, sustainable, livable municipality?
Yeah, first of all, I must tell you that my internet, for some reason, is not strong tonight. So I'm only getting part of the conversation. You may only be getting part of mine too. But I'll tell you, I'll do my best. Number one is all three of us are very, very connected. We empower each other. By working together and sharing ideas and communicating and doing improvements in infrastructure, we're empowering each other. We're empowering our city, our municipality, and in particular the residents. That's the way we work. I'm the city of Quinte West, but I'm a bigger part of the Bay of Quinte region. And that may sound very simple, but it's very important that we recognize each and every one of us. Like Balbo's got a lot of amenities, sure do. They've got more transit than I have, but I'm improving my transit, and I'm improving my charging stations. I'm empowering and encouraging people to use our trail systems. Walk, get out, exercise, use everything, and we're all doing that. We're empowering each other because of the abilities and desire that we have to make things better and more attractive for the people in this area. And where does it all shake out? Well, try and buy a house. Good luck. The builders in our area are pounding nails and buying 2x4s as fast as they can possibly produce them. Maybe they want them faster, but that's a kind of, I think, environment that we have created in the Bay of Quinte region. And I'm proud of what Mitch does, and I'm proud of what Steve does. Sometimes I'm jealous, but I don't let that be known. The positive element is that I'm proud of what they do and how they manage everything that they have on their table. Are there many challenges? There are many challenges. Yes, there is. The one most important one right now that's hitting me is a very small, minute gypsy moth. Yeah, it's taken over the virus, the gypsy moth. So, we're working on a plan. I have my director of public works and so on, working with Jim Pine, Hastings County, Reeve, Warden Phillips, Belleville, and so on. We're working on a plan to hopefully have something in place for next year. There's not a lot we can do this year, but we've lost a lot of good trees, a lot of valuable trees. Environmental impact is tremendous. And I worked with Mark Cullen to raise $10 million to plant the trees along the 401 from 8 Wing Trenton is where we planted our first tree, and he's going to plant the last one at the Parliament buildings. And he has raised $10 million. So that gives you an idea of what a tree is worth, what the environment's worth to all of us. And we're so attractive here, and Steve will tell you that sometimes he has to tell people to stay home. Anyway, I'll let you take over. Thank you. I hope I've answered most of it.
Sounds good, Jim. I will follow up, but you must be a tree lover given your number one concern. So Steve, that's a good segue to you, and I certainly enjoy visiting the county and look forward to being welcomed back when the time's appropriate.
Well, thank you for coming and making a contribution to the economy.
I spend some money there when I visit.
Jim, really talked about our relationship, the relationship between our three municipalities and the relationship we have personally, Jim, Mitch, and I. But Prince Edward County is a as everybody knows, is an island municipality, but our biggest challenge is, and we have several, but our biggest one at this point in time is affordable housing. And I would be very surprised if Mitch and Jim didn't share that was their most pressing issue too. The extremely high demand combined with a very low supply of housing in Prince Edward County has pushed home sale prices into the stratosphere. I believe some of the statistics we work with are that housing prices have increased 41% over the previous 10 months. And over 12 months, that would be 49%. And that figure comes from broker and real estate agent Preet Hull, who was a provincial candidate for the Green Party in, I believe, 2010. I believe that's
2011. Yeah.
Yeah. But the affordable housing issue has a profound impact on everything, particularly our businesses who, must have workers, and workers have to live someplace. And the exorbitant prices that are in the market right now just make that prohibitive. So our businesses suffer as a result of not being able to find employees. Now, this situation existed before the current housing price explosion, but it's certainly been exacerbated by that, as well as what we've experienced through the growth of short-term accommodations. And because of the pandemic, the number of people that are working from home. And the availability to find affordable housing has been very difficult. So we have had to take some fairly, some steps to address this ourselves. For instance, we formed a not-for-profit housing corporation, a standalone corporation, that is going to be working to develop affordable housing in the municipality. And it is making some headway. And their first undertaking is the old Wellington Arena, for anybody that may be familiar with that. And that is going to be converted to affordable housing. But also as a standalone corporation, they're able to access external funding through sources such as CMHC and other providers. We also have, because of Prince Edward's popularity, the development community has expressed obviously interest in creating housing here. And we have dozens of new builds slated over the next 10 years that we hope will come to fruition, as soon as possible. Our new official plan is going to, certainly has elements in it that encourage the development of affordable housing. For instance, we have eliminated in the new plan country lot subdivisions and reduced those severances from one per lot to one per lot from the two. And this is to help preserve the natural landscape and also minimize conflicts with and preserve agricultural lands. And we want to direct growth to the settlement areas within the counties, Picton and Wellington, for instance. So this is a long road ahead of us, but it is our biggest challenge. It hasn't been made any easier. I don't think any role in municipal government has been made any easier as a result of the pandemic. It is certainly distracted from a lot of the plans we might normally have undertaken, but that was beyond our control. But we have the housing challenge, and that is the one we have to address most specifically and most directly for the needs of our businesses and our residents, because we want people who grew up here and work here to be able to live here. And we are working as hard as we can, as thoroughly as we can, to make that a reality. So
Great, thanks for that,
I
Steve.
don't know if that answers the question, but it's certainly our priority, and we are very passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And before I send it over to Mitch, I was going to just say to everyone that I'd encourage you to read the Green Party of Ontario's housing platform at gpo.ca/housing. The Toronto Star ran an editorial yesterday saying it's a masterclass plan, and TVO Agenda last week did an analysis of it and basically said, hey, the Greens have a housing plan and it's actually really good. And I think it's very comprehensive, and it looks at the role the private sector can play, and also the fact that government needs to play a bigger role as well in sort of balancing interests, across the political spectrum, to talk about it in a pretty comprehensive way. And on that note, I should have said this to Jim, that in the interest of being nonpartisan, I'm trying not to be too partisan tonight, because I know municipal governments like to avoid partisanship. One thing I did like in the Conservative government's budget was there is a fair amount of money for rural broadband, which is something I've been advocating for a long time. And so hopefully we can get that broadband laid in Quinte, so your internet will be better. So anyway, Mitch, I'll turn the question over to you to just, what do you see as the biggest challenge you face in Belleville?
Well, thanks very much, Mike, and it's a pleasure to meet you virtually. Thank you very much for your service to Ontario during these interesting times. And standing invitation, I know Jim and Steve and I would love to get to meet you when you come through, and please do so. I think I would agree with everything that my colleagues Jim and Steve have said about some things, and including our relationship, which cannot, I think, be overstated. I think over the years, the Quinte region has been coming together, and certainly the mayors and the municipalities have sort of moved it along. But we really, I think, have taken it to another step. And I give a lot of credit to Jim Harrison, because it was either in October or November 2018, after the election, Jim was re-elected. Steve and I were both first-time elected mayors, and Jim had us for lunch. And we had a nice chat, and he gave us, some of his heads up suggestions about what to sort of look forward, and paid for lunch, which was even better. And but it got us off, I think, on the right foot, and we've moved along. And I would say that we have an excellent relationship, one in which we can talk and be honest and frank with each other. But we are very supportive of what we're doing. And again, when Jim Harrison talks about the fact that what's good for Belleville or what's good for Prince Edward County, or what's good for is good for all of us, he's 100% right. And we all benefit when we work together. And I give credit to the previous federal government when they created this Bay of Quinte riding, because it really has brought us together like we have not been for a long time, and we'll go forward. In terms of the topic of, what's our biggest challenges, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, because people always say, why do municipalities always talk about money? Why are you always talking about money? And the reason is because we are set up to have too many responsibilities and not enough funding to fulfill them. So I don't want to say that we were set up to fail, but certainly we were set up to be squeezed. And there was a rationale at the time, when Section 91 and 92 of the Constitution was created, listing the federal and provincial powers. There's no mention of municipalities. And so there was a lot of concern about allowing municipalities to grow into a third official level of government. And they wanted to limit our scope, limit the things that we were supposed to do. And so they made it so that we had few resources in which to spend. But over the years, successive provincial governments continue to reduce their role in their constitutional duties, and they're shifting them to municipalities without shifting funding. And so they're squeezing money out of the system based on the fact that municipalities have got to step in and deal with it. And so, for example, I'll give you a couple quick examples. Long-term care, nursing homes, never designed to be a municipal responsibility, but here we are, obligated to operate them and obligated to fund them. Social services, everything from employment assistance to training to welfare to housing, social housing to homelessness, all on part of municipalities that we are dealing with it. We have all of the obligations, all of the responsibilities, and none of the tools to be able to do something about it. So we've got that. And then perhaps I think what I would suggest is the best example is on the water and the wastewater side. So, your tap water, but also your toilets. In the 1980s, the province of Ontario ran all those systems. They owned them, they operated them, and they turned them over to municipalities and made us operate them only using what we call user fees. So the people who use those systems are obligated to pay for them. And if you have people in your municipality who are on well and on septic, they're not contributing to those public water systems, even though they are huge costs to run. So, I say, with all due respect, I know people get tired of the fact that we're always talking about money, but it is our biggest challenge, is how to find a way to do all the things that people expect us to, that we were traditionally set up to do, but also for that additional work. So, we all have, I think, those issues in common. Certainly we have specific issues that deal with our municipalities based on different economies or geographies. But I would say the biggest challenge we have is on the funding side. And, it's not so much that we just want more money to be able to spend more money. We want to be able to fulfill our responsibilities and our obligations to our residents who rely on them. And we want to be able to do it properly.
Great, thanks for that. I'm going to do a follow-up round of questions, and I think I'll start with you, Mitch, and then work back, just because I want to follow up a bit on when we think of sustainability. Obviously, you're part of a Green Party meeting, so we oftentimes think of environmental sustainability, but financial sustainability is vitally important as well. And I personally think there's a strong link between environmental sustainability and fiscal sustainability. And Steve talked about affordability challenges, particularly around housing. And so I'm curious, what do you think a sustainable fiscal model would look like for municipalities? And what role, I don't want to be too prescriptive, but what role could the province play in that? And oftentimes that discussion happens either upload, download costs or services, or look at things like the City of Toronto Act with additional revenue tools and possibly expanding some of those revenue sources to municipalities. From your perspective, what do you think are the priorities to create a sustainable fiscal framework for municipalities?
Well, that's a good question. And it's one that politics hurts being able to have a proper discussion about it. And so if you give me a second to explain,
Sure.
Municipalities, we're in a wide range of activities, very complicated. But fundamentally, we operate under a property tax system where people use after-tax dollars based on the value of their homes. It's got nothing to do with whether they're employed or unemployed, if they're retired. It doesn't matter what the economy is. You're in that situation where that's your primary source of funding. And as you said, we're not able to withstand the ups and downs of an economy that changes because we can't run a deficit. So we are able to borrow for capital projects, but not for operating expenses. And so that itself, I think, is probably the fundamental thing that has to be examined. We say, income taxes and other forms of progressive taxation are important. Many people don't understand that in Ontario, there are two types of cities. There is the Municipal Act that governs all municipalities, and then there's the City of Toronto Act that governs the City of Toronto. And the City of Toronto has different rules that they operate on. They offer different services, and they also have different revenue tools so they can raise funds. And a lot of residents look and say, well, you look what they're doing. Why don't you do that? And so it is different. Some municipalities have really strong industrial sectors, and they are paying multiple times on a dollar basis what residential does. And so it allows them different fiscal flexibility to address things. So I think what I would say, Mike, is first of all, we've got to take a look at the whole property tax system. And is that really the way that we want to fund the services that we expect municipalities to do? Second thing I would say is that once we get through that discussion, which I'm not confident we're really going to have, regardless of how we talk about it, it's really tough to sort of to look at redoing all that. But something that we can do is deal with the shift in from grants to what the province is now giving us in terms of loans, low interest loans, and making sure that we, instead of that they give us stable funding, so we have a understanding of how to properly forecast our capital and some of our operating expenses as we're moving forward. The reason why that's so important to us is that the municipal investment in building your economy takes the longest for us to see a return. Let me give you an example. In 2000, we had done all the work to expand Bella Boulevard to 4 lanes from Sydney Street east to Walbridge Loyalist. But at that time, we'd only had enough funds to do 2 lanes. So we've done a 4-lane expansion, and we have to put out approximately $23 million for that work. Businesses will locate and they will start to pay property taxes, but it'll take 15 to 20 years for us to pay back our investment in that. In the meantime, corporate income tax, personal income tax, everybody working in that area, carbon tax, all those fees are being collected by the federal and provincial governments in the short term, when they are putting the least amount of money into that project. So I hope that answers your question in terms of where it's at. And I think once we deal with those challenges, then it'll be so much easier because it's predictable. We have much more certainty. And we're also not having to go cap in hand to the provincial government all the time, virtually begging for assistance on capital projects that are essential to our communities.
No, that's great. That's very helpful. Jim, if your internet is working, do you want to take a stab at that question around fiscal sustainability? Okay, Steve, I'm gonna shift the puck over to you, and we'll see if we can get Jim reconnected. So what are your thoughts?
Speaking of going hat in hand to the upper levels of government, which we've been doing concerning broadband expansion and improvements. I think Mitch covered this really well and really clearly and really succinctly. We are under significant pressure as a result of the responsibilities that have been passed down to us. And in Prince Edward County's case, we don't have the luxury that Mitch has or Jim has in the development of large tracts of commercial areas. We are effectively a tourism economy slash agricultural economy. And, for that reason, we don't have the latitude to be able to rely on corporations or large companies moving in and they then being taxed at a more attractive rate than just residential. The agricultural community, of course, is different because they are taxed at a lower rate than residential. So we in terms of our fiscal handling are relying on that residential base, recognizing that even though housing prices are going up, there's a limit to what people can and will pay, and we've seen in the past few years migration out of Prince Edward County because of taxes and just general affordability. It has been and will remain very difficult. We are consistently approaching the province to take advantage of any grant funds that are available. be they for infrastructure purposes or roads or anything else. But we've got a limited tax base, and we will not be able to sustain anything more that the province, particularly the province, or maybe the feds would throw on our backs. I'll give you the example of County Road 49, which is the bane of a lot of people's existence. And this was downloaded to the municipality by the provincial government. And that roadway, which is the principal entry point from Eastern Ontario into Prince Edward County, requires a rebuild. And the cost of that is going to be $21 million. And that is way in excess of what we budget for road work in any given year. So our reliance is on grants that may be available to fund capital projects like that. And we keep knocking on the door, and we will continue to do so, because we will not be able to afford to rehabilitate that road to that extent on the basis of the province handing it down to us. And sorry, now it's your responsibility. I wish it wasn't, but it is. And at this point, we are stretched in terms of our ability to generate additional taxation revenue from elsewhere. So it's not an easy situation, but we're doing as well as we can, and we're certainly, our economy is thriving. The tourism economy is thriving, but spending on capital projects is just has to be done very judiciously and very carefully, and hopefully with the reliance of grant money coming from elsewhere.
Great. I'm going to ask you some follow-ups on that, but I want to give Jim an opportunity. I see him, and so hopefully we'll be able to hear him. What are your thoughts on fiscal sustainability, Jim?
Well, these two guys ahead of me are a little modest, it's not new. We never have enough money. It's not new. So it's been the same all the years I've been here. Never have enough money, but we are the most efficient, accountable level of government that exists. Yes, sir. We make our dollars go where they need to be put, and we stretch them. We don't leave any corners uncovered. And yes, we have to beg. There are times we have to beg, but we still show both the provincial and federal levels just what can be done with a dollar. And I can give you many examples, Mitch and Steve too. Yes, we put a new wastewater line across the Trent River from the west end of the city to the plant. We start out with the line, we get to the river, and we apply for permits from Oceans and Fisheries to get a permit. To put the line, a brand new line across the river, properly installed, replacing a line that no one even knew when it was put in place. So they tell us we have to have a permit. So they stop work on the west side of the river. We couldn't get across. A year and a half later, somebody comes back to us and says, we don't need a permit. We don't need a permit. Yes, I'm just giving an example of inefficient levels of government, inefficient, improperly run, and not knowing what's happening. Yes, we completed that line to the plant, and it makes the infrastructure in our city not only great, sustainable, but attractive, because now we can build on the west end. We can build more houses. We can build more apartment buildings and affordable places. We're a military city. We receive a large amount of money. It's called PILT, payment in lieu of taxes. And it's so important that we have housing for those military people who are regularly transferred here. and we need it. All three of us need that housing, and it needs to be affordable. Yes, it does. The other thing that's impacting our infrastructure from my perspective is the price of land. Yes, the price of land. How much is a lot worth in the rural area of Quinte West with no services, no entranceway, just a piece of land, what, 22,500 square feet to build a house on? What's it worth? Well, it used to be 30 or 40,000. If you can buy one now for 150, you've got a good deal. 150 to $160,000 for a small piece of property to build a house on. And you've got to put in the entranceway. You've got to get the sewer and the water, septic, all of that in place as part of your cost. So yes, affordable is very important, but how do you control certain things? And Steve has said they've reduced the number of lots. Well, and it's great, but every time you reduce something such as the supply and the demand is increasing, then the cost of the supply goes up. That's what we're faced with in terms. So yes, we've done a lot of, Balbo, the county, and we as well. The two things most important, as I said, the COVID. Well, I started with the caterpillar. Why? Well, because the caterpillar is killing a lot of things. I'm not a tree hugger, but I realize that environment is very important to us. Leaves produce oxygen and so on, and places for birds and all the other elements. And we need that lumber. I burn a little bit of wood here, and over the years, I can cut mostly dead and still have enough to supply my house for the whole winter. This year, I'll have a supply so large that I don't even know if I can, at my age, whether I can even cut it. So, there's a lot of things with infrastructure. Yes.
I tell you what, we are going to have to build better broadband infrastructure. I'm going to keep pushing on that one. And I can't tell you, I was on the province's economic recovery committee from COVID last summer and fall. And the number one issue that most people brought up was number one, broadband internet access, and number two, housing affordability, which has been a big part of the conversation tonight. Yeah, I think we lost you, Jim. Okay, Steve, I'm going to go to you next, and then we'll wrap up because I know we're almost out of time. All of you have talked about infrastructure, and I know, especially when I've been meeting with mayors in southwestern Ontario, there's been a lot of conversation about shoreline erosion along the Great Lakes and the impact that's having on infrastructure. Lots of concerns about flooding and the increased incidence of flooding, and I would say other impacts of the climate crisis and how that's affecting infrastructure costs. I know the federal government just released a report yesterday talking about just the elevated cost now of infrastructure damage from extreme weather events is in the multi-billion dollars. And I'm just curious, just in terms of your own municipal planning, and as you think of infrastructure, I think, do you see climate impacts affecting your costs? And are those impacts going into your analysis of future costs?
Well, we're actually going through that we're going through that. I'll call it a study. That we're working to find out just what the cost has been, particularly for flooding in 2017 and 2019. As everybody knows, we're an island community. We've got about 700 kilometers of shoreline. Our municipal infrastructure and private homes and businesses face the threat of flooding, in part owing to the changing climate. As I say, 2017 and 2019 were huge years for flooding. We were preparing for 2020, but that thankfully did not transpire. But water levels this year are significantly lower. But we fully expect that flooding is going to occur in the future. Drought is also a concern. Given that agriculture remains a significant sector of our economy, as I said earlier, and many of our rural residents rely on private wells for potable water. So the drought we experienced in 2016 we are looking to 2021 and whether we are going to experience the same thing this year. But we take dealing with the environment very seriously in Prince Edward County. We have formed, as everybody as certainly this group knows, I believe, we formed an environmental advisory committee that was formed in 2019, and I believe Jane Leslie, the chair of the committee, came and spoke several weeks ago to you about the initiatives they're undertaking. We are in terms of adjustments we're making to address climate change. We have, converted to LED lighting in buildings and our streets. We've improved our walking and cycling trails to enable people to get out and exercise, and the Millennium Trail being a prime example of that. And we are embarking on a tree planting program, and we are also going to be going through an extensive review of our organics and composting program. As I say, we take the environment very seriously. Now, the extent of cost on infrastructure is somewhat difficult to calculate, but we're certainly have seen significant erosion in 2019 as a result of the flooding. For residential properties, shoreline properties has in some cases been quite catastrophic, and that extends not just to residences but also agricultural lands that have been affected by flooding and made unworkable because of rises in water levels. So I can't quantify it, but it's something that's certainly on our radar to examine and understand more fully what that impact is on infrastructure and services as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm almost out of time. I think I was supposed to wrap you up at 7:50, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment on that as well, because I remember, I was in Belleville in 2019. I was at the radio station doing an interview, and I was worried that we were going to be underwater at the radio station. The water levels were so high.
No, and I remember we were scheduled to have a meeting, and unfortunately your schedule didn't allow for it. But again, standing invitation. No, I would agree with Steve. And, and the thing about 2019 and the impacts on us, it literally was reducing the size of Prince Edward County as erosion because of high water was affecting. So, we had a municipality that was literally getting smaller every single day because of the effects of climate change. So, it's very apparent. Yesterday at Belleville City Council, we declared a climate emergency. We joined one of the 500 municipalities in Canada. Quinte West and Prince Edward County were ahead of us. But we did so primarily so that we can qualify for funding that will come from the new carbon tax stream that the federal government has collected. So, we already spend literally millions of dollars on protecting us from the effects of climate change in the future. And I'm very proud of our history of taking action on ensuring that every decision we make is also looked through the lens of climate change. I know we're in a hurry, Mike, but before you leave, we talk about the fact that we don't have enough money and we have all these demands, but we also sometimes don't talk about how the province could reduce their costs and our costs in the short term. And let me just give you a couple of examples. First, I think we have to take a look at policing and the requirement for municipalities to fund police service boards who are only able to use fully sworn police officers to do the work of that. For example, allowing non-sworn police officers to deal with non-life-threatening situations will reduce those costs and allow us to reinvest the money we would put there into some other things. So, we need to take a hard look at that. And I really think that we need to reduce the influence of the very strong police associations that make everything about safety and the security in the community, when we really don't need a fully paid for constable doing basic traffic management, particularly in construction zones, those types of things that will go a long way. And the second thing is, allow us to make agreements with the federal government. Because we don't have legal status, any funds that come through it have to come from the province. And it saw us in a situation with COVID relief, where we were basically being held hostage through a power struggle between the federal governments and provincial governments across the country, as they were fighting over education and healthcare funding, which is very, very important. But it's stuck municipalities and our funding stream in limbo. And I know the consequence of allowing municipalities to sign agreements with the federal government, and why provincial governments are not interested. But I think, one of the nice things about a party like the Green Party is that there are no sacred cows that you don't have to look at. You're not wed to the old ways and whatnot. So when we talk about fiscal systems for municipalities, why not advocate for a complete rethink? When we talk about looking at policing and making sure that we can have mental health professionals involved in those kinds of things, why not look at the Police Act and Police Service Act and look at changing it? And when it comes to making agreements with other levels of government, why not allow municipalities to step up? We are a modern, mature form of government. We provide most services that residents rely on. And I think that we want to be not just the junior partner in this relationship, but full partners at the adult table.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Music to my ears, Mitch, because I think that's partly why tonight's conversation is about empowering municipalities, because I fundamentally believe that all three levels of government need to be equal partners at the table, and so I will, when I'm allowed to start traveling around the province, I'm going to take all three of you up on the invitation. I would love to meet with you individually and collectively. And I will say that one of the things I like about being a Green MPP in the legislature is I am able to talk about and say some things and do some things and work with different political parties on things of all colors, to think outside the box. And that's very liberating, I can tell you, in the House some days, to have that freedom. So I just want to thank all three of you for joining us tonight. I want to congratulate Erica on your nomination, and hopefully when I do visit, we can knock on a few doors together. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us tonight, and I want to hand things over to Lori. This has been a great conversation, and I'm hoping that we can continue it in the future when I visit in person.
Thanks so much, Mike. We really appreciate your hosting duties. You did a wonderful job with that. Amazing. And a big thank you to the mayors for your insight. I learned so much today. And I just think it's really been in so much education for many of us, and just of many of the challenges you're facing and how you are working together and still, coming up with ideas. I think that's amazing. And I just want to say that, we need more Green MPs, so it's never too late to jump into provincial politics. Anyway, thank you so much for your time tonight. That was really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Don, pass felicitations along to Jerry.
Well, this has been a great meeting. Really appreciate it tonight.